Here in the spring of 2020, there's a lot of consternation about possible vaccine for the coronavirus or anything else of the sort. And rightfully so. If you're quarantined, if you've had COVID 19, if you know somebody who did, or perhaps somebody who lost their life to it, anything else of the sort, invariably you have felt the effects. And part of the trepidation around it is related to how there's no vaccine for it yet. Hold that thought. I would not put it past ingenious scientists from the US or Australia or some other great place, Israel maybe, to have some sort of vaccine within reasonable order. I would never doubt that. Okay, so that's one thing to hopefully ease some of the consternation around the whole coronavirus situation. Otherwise, though, pandemics are nothing new in not just American history, but world history. Obviously, the bubonic plague killed roughly a quarter of all Europeans in the 14 1500s, roughly around there, earlier than that. Um, we talked about the Spanish flu as it relates to the World War I era and how it affected millions and millions of people across the world. About 60 million people lost their lives worldwide because of that flu pandemic. And today, obviously, you have the coronavirus situation. Pandemics are nothing new, as I mentioned, but how they are handled and how they are perhaps dealt with and possibly even eliminated, that's come a very long way. I mentioned a little bit ago the bubonic plague and how it decimated a quarter of all Europeans 600 years ago or so. Nowadays, that we can easily defeat the plague, the Black Plague. But yeah, we've got all kinds of medications and technological breakthroughs that has virtually eliminated it. It's easily defeatable. Smallpox, which had eliminated roughly about 90% of all Native Americans after the Europeans had made their way to the Americas, we have a vaccine for it. If there was only a vaccine back then, it could have prevented lives or from needlessly dying. Otherwise, though, nowadays, because of the post World War II era, and really sometimes before that, but really being bolstered by World War II, you saw research and development of many different scientific and other medical breakthroughs that really benefited society from a health standpoint. Starting with various different antibacterial drugs that can fight infections. You had Louis Pasteur and Jules Francois Joubert that used antiseptic solution that could prevent infections during surgery. So you have various different drugs, sulfuric type drugs, that are also proven to be effective in fighting blood infections or anything else of the sort that were treated around this time. And of course, by accident, Alexander Fleming discovered mold on an orange peel, and he discovered that it can have properties that could treat various different illnesses. And a number of years later, scientists at Oxford University in England produced that particular health promoting and illness fighting property, and they made it into a medicine that can be taken in pill form. We know that as penicillin. Penicillin has amazing effects at killing bacteria. Okay, so you have various different breakthroughs in related to antiseptics, penicillin, which fights bacteria. Also around this time, you have various different immunizations that come into play as well. So back in the late 1800s, and prior to that in world history, even in the first half of the 20th century, you have various different illnesses like typhus or typhoid fever, malaria, smallpox. Many of those had decimated massive amounts of people in world history. Well, the first half of the 20th century saw some advent in towards maybe possibly preventing those. And by the time the 50s came around, there had now been immunizations by the way of vaccines that are now able to prevent those types of illnesses. For example, polio. Um, Polio had been a disease that had largely been feared. If children contracted polio, they could largely lose their ability to walk. Uh, Franklin Roosevelt, FDR, had polio, and he was in a wheelchair for the second half of his entire life. Vaccines that could prevent polio, fight against tetanus, um, fight against smallpox, would not just save people's lives, but they would virtually eliminate the spread of those illnesses. Smallpox doesn't exist in large forms to this day. Maybe here and there you see a small outbreak, but they're easily detainable. And one of the reasons why is that they're bacterial and they're not viral. And so several different things come into play as far as that. More on that here in a second, though. Otherwise, though, smallpox, polio, they had been largely eliminated from society. Now, you still see bits of tuberculosis here and there, but that's still reasonably held in check. You don't see that anywhere near as prevalently as you used to. Um, of course, also something that affects the world every year, the United States is no different, is the flu. Influenza, type A, type B. If you've ever had the flu, it's no fun. Just last year I had flu A. Fortunately, it was a mild flu because I had the flu shot. So it's great. I got a vaccine to prevent me from getting the flu. So when I got the flu, it wasn't as bad. That was how it was explained to me by my physician, who said, oh, yes, you can still get the flu even if you had the flu shot several months prior. It's just if you do get it, your body's going to be able to fight it off quite a bit better and it won't be anywhere near as bad. Okay, I would just rather not have 102 fever, but whatever, right? I guess it's better than 104. I don't know. So I had the flu. The flu claims thousands upon thousands of lives across the world, in the United States and in itself as well. The flu's no fun. The chills, the body aches, the headaches, the fever. Oh, the flu's awful. Okay? But it can still be reasonably prevented because there is a flu vaccine that I urge everyone to get in the fall before flu season really starts to take place that could prevent you from getting the flu or prevent you from having a severe flu. Okay? So, bacterial vaccinations are one thing, viral vaccinations are another. That's why to this day it is still a work in progress to try and find a vaccine for coronavirus to prevent COVID-19. People still get the flu every year. It's just not as contagious, apparently, as the coronavirus is. So the need for a vaccine to prevent future illnesses and deaths related to the coronavirus, they're needed desperately. We'll work from there, okay? But in the 1950s and early 60s, as you saw a wide growth of vaccinations to prevent tetanus, smallpox, polio, the flu, you had antiseptics, you had all kinds of immunizations, you now saw an increase in infant health. You saw a decrease in mortality rates for infants. This is largely because there was great successes with medical adaptation. So you have vaccinations, immunizations, ability to kill bacteria, antiseptics, real significant medical breakthroughs that have saved a lot of people's lives. So from that standpoint, it's great. Life expectancy increased for everyone. Mortality rates lowered. Medical breakthroughs were great. On top of that, you also had various different pesticides that were developed around this time that would be used to kill insects that carry diseases. Um, Malaria is a disease that to this day affects millions of people across the world, especially in tropical climates. There are various insecticides that were developed during World War II, DDT, for example, that at the time were deemed as being neutral or harmless to humans and other mammals, but they were incredibly toxic to insects. Well, insects carry a lot of diseases. So the United States military obtained DDT and used it to disinfect, if you will, insects from various different parts of the South Pacific to keep American troops from being affected by malaria or other insect-borne illnesses. And it was very largely successful. DDT killed a lot of insects. It was deemed a while later that it wasn't exactly harmless to humans. Okay? It took a few decades for us to discover that, but at the time it was seen as great. Oh my gosh, DDT will kill everything. Awesome. Now we can go fight. Great. Okay? But otherwise, at the time, that's something that had a large effect on killing insects that carry diseases. Here in the Dallas area, I read an article recently about there was a mosquito that tested positive just a few days ago for West Nile virus. Oh, great. That's still around. While we're dealing with coronavirus, you still have the flu going around, and now West Nile is still around. Yay, fun times. Awesome. Okay. You might see various different trucks driving around in the spring and summertime, spraying the smoky type stuff along major streets or anything else of the sort. That is largely an insecticide that's meant to ward off mosquitoes. I don't know if it's going to kill them, but it will definitely repel them, which means that you're going to see fewer and fewer of them, which could lead to a decrease in cases of West Nile virus. Hopefully, right? Otherwise, though, medical advances, you're no longer bloodletting people like you did several centuries prior because they had an imbalance of fluids. You need to drain them of their evils and restore balance. Now you actually have medicine that will actually kill bacteria, might actually do something to prevent infection, might actually prevent large-scale pandemics or anything else of the sort. So, the 1950s, a great time for Advent for all of that.